Well, a little bit known to me before I walked in today, they asked me to introduce our speaker. So I'll tell you just a little bit about her. I had an opportunity to work with her for a period of time. And one of my remembrances, I tell this story in admiration for. She wouldn't want to say that we go back a long ways because obviously I'm a lot older, but but the year she took her PE exam in Tennessee, she was near delivery with her second child, I believe. And I happened to be at the test center that afternoon when they were getting through and was coming out. And I thought, taking the PE exam is hard enough. I cannot imagine it taking it under those conditions. And so Monica's always been a real trooper and very tough in things she can get done. So I wanted to just Monica Sertain. She's the branch manager of Patriot Engineers here in Nashville, and she's going to tell you a lot of good things.
Thank you, David. Uh, he neglected to mention he was there. His son Adam was taking the PE that same day, and I think Adam and I both passed, which is great, very exciting. Yeah, that is a funny story. When I walked in that day, there was two people. Can you guys all hear me? Okay. There are two people checking us in because when you check in for the PE, you've got like suitcases full of books, you've got stuff, you've got calculators, you've got a lot of, and you have to have your ID, you have to be there a certain time. And I walked up, obviously pregnant, and the guy that was standing there, it was a guy and a girl, and the guy looked at me like eyes wide. He goes, "Oh my God, when are you due?" I was like, wow. I still got a little ways, I'm good. And the lady that was standing there, she just like burst out laughing. I should have told him yesterday. Is that a problem? I think we'll be all right. Well, I wanted to thank you guys for inviting me to come out today. I guess it probably wasn't you, but your professors and stuff. I've talked with some of the engineering groups a couple times, just for show of hands, if you guys have already heard me blather on before. Okay, and you came back. Yes, thank you. Okay. Some of my presentations, probably what you guys have already seen. I'll try to get some new stories in there for those who have already been through it. But when people ask me to talk about civil engineering, I usually kind of do it from my perspective, what I've been through in my career. Probably because I've done a lot of different things, and I've had the opportunity to do a lot of really exciting things, at least to me. I've made a career out of doing things that most people probably never want to do. I'll go into that detail in a little while. But just to start off, civil engineers design, build, and maintain structures, infrastructure. How many people in here are civil? Are going after civil? Okay, what about electrical? All right, oh, you guys all sit together? Okay, mechanical? Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, I went to Virginia Tech. I graduated in 2001, and I would say that, kind of like you guys, mechanical engineers outweigh the civil engineers there too. That was probably, I think my graduating class from civil engineering had about 500. I think mechanical had more like 750, around that. Electrical, I think, was about the same size. But hopefully you guys, mechanical, the saying is, civil engineer or mechanical engineers build weapons, civil engineers build targets. So you must understand that we're complementary engineering. So civil engineers, the things that we work on: air you breathe, the water you drink, the house you sleep in, the toilet you flush, the trash you throw away, the trash other people throw away, the roads you drive on, and the bridges you travel over. So, like I said, what I'm going to do is kind of take you through my career. Early in my career, I started working before I even left school, so I'm going to talk to you about some of those instances. When I asked Lori what she wanted me to talk about today, she said she kind of wanted to focus more on careers and opportunities that would be available for you when you graduate, maybe how to take advantage of those, and just some pointers that I have. So I'll go through all those things. If you guys have any questions as we're going through it, just stop me, like raise your hand, blurt it out, and I'll answer any questions. But like I said, I've done a lot of different things throughout my career. I started working in the civil engineering profession after my freshman year of college. So I did, when I left school, I had 2 years of construction experience. And then I also had another 3 months of working at a wastewater treatment plant. So I had a lot of experience just when I graduated from college. And these are some of the things, and I'm going to kind of tell you a little about one project in particular, and then I'll take you through some other opportunities that entry-level people have. So this, is there anybody here from Virginia by chance? Okay, where in Virginia? Virginia Beach, okay. My favorite Virginia Tech quarterback is from that area, Michael Vick. We went to school together. And then when I graduated, he went to Atlanta, I went to South Carolina. He was following me, but yeah. It's another story. So early, one of my probably major projects I've ever worked on is the Smart Bridge over Wilson Creek. So people always ask me, that is a huge bridge. Where's the creek? Can you see this right here? That's Wilson Creek. So they built this giant bridge to go over that little creek. But really what they were doing is, it's called the Smart Bridge, and it's part of the Smart Road, which is a GM, Ford, Chevy project to test driving conditions. It's kind of probably more appealing to mechanical people. But what they did is they built a whole road that was a test bed to test different weather conditions on vehicles. So they could simulate like rain, wind, glare, snow, sleet, heat, all those things. And then this was a test bed. So this bridge was the was like the end part of the test bed. And that's what I worked on. So when I first got there, this I guess was my third construction project that I had worked on. My first one was an office complex in Maryland, right off of the Beltway outside of DC. The second one was a wastewater treatment plant upgrade that I worked on in Charlotte, North Carolina. So this was kind of my third construction site. Has anybody ever worked on a construction site? Okay, good. It's very good. Some things you pick up during your first construction site is you never wear brand new boots on the first day because they'll make fun of you ruthlessly. So by this time, I kind of picked up some of those things. But some of my duties included keeping up to date our daily diary. So every day I'd walk around the site and see who was working. I'd write down what they were working on, what equipment they were using, how many people they had, and there was multiple contractors working. PCL out of Florida was building. They were the main contractor, but we also had people doing concrete and different things like that. So one of my main duties was to go out and make sure I was recording everything that was happening on the project in the diary. I also did erosion control inspections. I was sent to get VDOT certification to test concrete. So every time they had trucks come out to pour the concrete piers, I would be one of the people helping to test concrete. We had somebody that was their sole job, but you can imagine pouring one of these lifts here on the pier, that's a lot of concrete. So I just help him with the concrete testing. I also took a lot of pictures. I was doing like a video or picture, we didn't have video really then, but picture record of the job site. So progress photos, that was another one of my responsibilities. And then I also checked and verified any deliveries. So like if we were getting stone, I would check the paperwork from the truck drivers versus what we thought we were getting. For concrete, I would do that same thing. Right after this project, I went to work on another really huge project at the Virginia Tech area. It was an I-81 Route 460 bypass. So on that project, it was a little different. I was, well, typically I usually am, the youngest person on a project, which means I know the most about technology, so it seems. So on that project, I came in, they were just starting. So they had me set up all their computers. I ran wires, set up all the computer stations and everything. And then all of the inspectors we had on that job were retired VDOT guys. So they're like between 55 to 70. They know everything there is to know about building roads, but they didn't know a whole lot about computers. So I had to teach them how to use our software. That was interesting. One guy, I said, okay, just take the mouse. And he was like, the mouse? Is there a mouse in here? I'm like, okay, let's back up. This is a mouse. But that's kind of what I had to work with. So at that project, I was responsible for the daily diary, also reviewing erosion control stuff. After that project ended, I went to work at a wastewater treatment plant. They were doing their pre-treatment program. So we got to do industry inspections and sampling from the wastewater treatment plant. So for the industry inspections, what we were doing is going around to different industries within the city and looking at their wastewater process. So any water that they sent back to the treatment plant, we had to make sure it met certain limits. As exciting as you guys obviously seem to think that is, it was very exciting because I got to go to, I got to see all the different industries that were in the city. So there was a meat packing plant. Couldn't get the smell of smoked meat out of my hair for like a week. It was a little gross. I went to a facility that made gun safes, and that was pretty neat. I went to another facility where they made gold jewelry, and they made us put on like hair nets, shoe nets. I mean, we had a whole other set of clothes, and when we left, they took our clothes and burnt them so they could collect any gold shavings. I mean, it was very interesting stuff. But my first job out of college, I went to work at the Savannah River site. Has anybody ever heard of that? Okay, it's a DOD nuclear weapons complex that's in Aiken, South Carolina. That was a little different. I sought some of my professors at school for advice before going to work there because it was a little new. I mean, how many of you guys have ever worked with nuclear material? It's a little different. You know, it can be scary. All my aunts were like, "Are you going to be able to have babies?" I'm like, "Yeah, I think I'll be okay." You know, people do this all the time. But one of the things that you'll learn when you get out of school is despite all the training and all the classes and everything you get, you're still going to have to go through specialized training for your job. So when I started at SRS, I had to get HAZWOPER training, which is like hazardous waste operations personnel. So it's a 40-hour training on how to be around hazardous waste and just different things to be wary of, and you have to get 8-hour refresher every year. I did RADCON training, which is basically radiological safety. So you find out stuff like bananas have more radioactivity than I got when I was on site working. Platinum, like people make rings out of platinum. Platinum is radioactive material, not enough that you'll ever lose your finger in your lifetime, but there is radioactive waves coming out of that. I did record training and then also transportation training. So when I first got there, I was assigned to the hazardous and mixed waste storage and treatment facility. So basically what we did is anybody on site, and this was like just to kind of give you perspective, there were 25,000 people working at the Savannah River site when I was there. And that was down from like the 90s when they had way more personnel because they had 3 nuclear reactors on site. And when I was there, none of them were actually working. They were more doing cleanup. But still, we had 25,000 people there. There were multiple areas where people were still processing tritium. That was kind of one of the main missions for SRS. When you have a nuclear bomb, there's tritium in the bomb, and that's what makes the nuclear reaction happen. And tritium, anybody know this? Half-life for tritium? It's like 13 years. So after 13 years, you have to reprocess, you have to get new tritium to go into the nuclear bombs. So that was one of the things that we did at the Savannah River site was making tritium. So people would send us waste. And me, as an entry-level engineer at the site, I would compare waste packages that would come to me. It would have like sampling data. I would compare that to our waste acceptance criteria, and I would determine whether or not it could come into our facility. Now, we had different software packages that would help us determine whether we were going to make a fission reaction just by having a lot of nuclear waste stored together. But it involved a lot of safety checks. I had to learn really quickly the waste acceptance criteria and what things to look out for. For example, we had waste out there that if it formed crystals, those crystals were pyrophoric. You guys know what that means? It could burst into flames. So we had waste out there that if it formed crystals and you just rocked it, it could explode. So there's a lot of stuff there you had to be really careful of, chemicals and also the radioactivity. I also did emergency response. Coming out of school, I don't know if you guys do this, but I knew Excel like backwards and forwards. And we had a database that it wasn't Excel, but it was really based on Excel. And there's a lot of engineers there that just, not that they couldn't pick it up, they didn't want to. So I learned how to use our database really well. So I was one of the people tasked on our emergency response team. So that means we would have site-wide drills, and like they would come up with some kind of an emergency, like a drum spilled, or there's people coming on site trying to steal uranium or whatever. And we would go to our report stations, wherever those were, and we would figure out what kind of waste was involved, what steps the responders had to take to deal with the waste, whether they could go in at all, like if them walking into the room would instantly kill them, or if it was something like they could walk in the room for 5 minutes, but then their hair would fall out 6 months later. So different things like that, and that was one of my emergency response responsibilities. I also did pollution prevention. I would work with people that made waste and try to reduce the amount of waste that they sent to us, maybe changing their processes, maybe the chemicals that went into it, or just a lot of different options. And then right before I left the Savannah River site, I went to work in the transuranic waste division. And for that one, I was in charge of a couple of different waste characterization pads. So picture a building about the size of this room, maybe twice the size, depending on what we were doing there. And we would be doing like radiography. We would be testing the gas inside of waste drums before we shipped them to Carlsbad, New Mexico for storage at the WIP facility. So when I was there, and this is going to be kind of one of my first tips, my boss came to our group and said, the people out in Carlsbad need help with our quality assurance. As you can imagine, anytime you work with nuclear waste, there's a lot of safety protocol. I mean, a lot. Like when you write guidelines for people to do things, there's should, must, never, and those things mean very specific things in the nuclear industry. So they needed help in Carlsbad with reviewing packages that were coming there. And he said, so that's going to require, you'll spend 2 weeks in Carlsbad, come back here, spend 2 weeks, 2 weeks in Carlsbad, come back here, but we need somebody to do that. And I was married, but I didn't have any kids at the time, and I was like, ooh, I will do that. I would love to do that. So I got trained on how to do that, another kind of special training, and then I went out to Carlsbad. As it happened, they decided that it would be easier for the person in Carlsbad to move to South Carolina than to have us going back and forth. So I only had to go out there one time, but that kind of let my boss know that I'm not afraid of a challenge. So that's just something, if your boss ever comes to you or comes to your group and says, hey, we need somebody too, as an entry-level engineer, as a mid-level engineer, you should be the first one to say, ooh, I'd like to do that. I'd be willing to give that a try. So I didn't actually start doing design work to kind of, I guess I'd been out of school for about 5 years before I went to work at Barge Wagner, where David was real nice. He said we worked together. He was like my boss's 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 boss when I was at Barge Wagner. But that's where I started doing design work. And at the very beginning, some of the things that I did were preliminary designs. I would do hand sketches of things. I would check slope on diversion channels, and I would do rough calculations. I would do some AutoCAD work, like drafting, and then I would give that to the licensed engineer to review and stamp. And then I know you guys are probably, all you mechanical electrical are getting a little bored listening to the civil perspective, So I did talk to one of my colleagues. He's an electrical engineer. And he said for electrical and mechanical, where he works, and his firm is just electrical and mechanical, but they do design work. He said pretty much everybody comes in, entry level, the first thing they do is drafting. And that's with Revit, BIM, or 3D modeling. You also do load analysis software, codes and standards study, and then you'll check submittals versus design requirements. And those are all things that I did early in my career, like co-oping. I did those on the construction sites. Also utilizing lighting software to analyze the photometrics of sites and buildings, which means nothing to me, but for you electrical, that should mean something, or maybe you need to go talk to your professors, I don't know. And then mechanical, they do heating and cooling load analysis, code and standards study, and then checking submittals versus design documents. And that's really in a design field. If you are doing like manufacturing, a lot of times if they're hiring entry-level people, you can learn a lot of stuff very quickly if you're working in like an actual industrial setting. This is one of the projects. Does anybody know what this one is? Music City Center. All right. When I started the Office for Patriot, this is one of the very first projects that I landed for the company, was environmental testing out at the Music City Center. So the work that I was doing is something that entry-level environmental type person would do, and that was we're actually going out and doing visual inspections of drywall, and then using testing equipment to test the drywall. And those are things that entry-level people would be doing. Extra points if anybody knows what this is. Center Hill Dam, yes. Is that because I told you that before, or you just know that? Okay, all right, then you would know that. All right, so this is Center Hill Dam. My company right now, we're doing concrete testing at Center Hill Dam. For those of you that aren't from around this area, you might not have heard of Wolf Creek Dam, Center Hill Dam, but these dams were built back in the, I think it's the 50s, and they both have issues with leakage around the dam. There's like sinkholes that come up over here and back in here, and it's showing that there's water leaking through the dam. So much so, in fact, that this dam creates hydroelectric power, and to keep the fish and all the habitats downstream healthy, they have to release so much water every day through this dam. They actually don't have to release any water because of the leakage that's going through the dam. So this is a project that's been going on since about 2012, and we've been doing concrete testing, which is something that I did very early in my career. You actually go out, get concrete from a concrete truck, and you go through testing. And it's a good way to get introduced to construction sites. But this is what I have some of my entry-level people do as well. So for any of you that have heard me before, you know that I do a lot of prison work. Except it's not prison, they're correctional facilities. But I do a lot of work at correctional facilities. That's mainly environmental compliance work, and that's something that I've done throughout my career as well. And as far as environmental compliance, you've probably heard of environmental site assessments, or I do a lot of spill plans, spill prevention, control, and countermeasure plans. And I worked at EarthTech for a while in my career, and one of the things that I did was, at EarthTech, we would have a licensed professional go out and do the actual site visit, and then they would write their notes and everything. They'd bring it back to somebody that was more entry level, and we would write the report for them. And then they would review the report, stamp it, or whatever they had to do. But that's something that I've done at a lot of different places. And then as I advanced in my career, I was the person going out and doing inspections and teaching people how to do things. So like for an environmental site assessment, you go out to a building and try to determine if there's any environmental issues. Well, you guys coming out of school, you probably have some stuff that you might look for. Is there anybody in here that does environmental or has an interest in environmental? Okay. So some of the stuff you might look for, any ideas? Okay. Fair enough. When you come out of school, those are things that you have to learn when you get in the industry. As somebody just new out of school, if you're going into a building, you might be looking for things like asbestos, just based on the age of the building, because you learn about asbestos in class. Okay, so you're looking for asbestos, and then there might be some water leaking or something. You might be thinking, okay, that could be mold. Mold, that's a concern. But the more experience you have, the better kind of evaluation you can do. For example, those exit signs all have tritium in them. Okay, that's what keeps them lit up. They're not connected to like a power source, so, or I mean they are, but if the power goes out, that light still has to be lit. You don't have any in here, but the light ballasts, you know, like the lights that are usually hanging up, those have, not all of them, but some of them have mercury in them, okay? And people that are at the facility, they don't know that. You know, the people at Wendy's or wherever, they don't know they have mercury. They don't know how to properly dispose of them. So those are things that you pick up as you're moving along. So the majority of my career, and probably a lot of other people, is a lot of paperwork. Now, I've been really lucky that I've got to do kind of change the type of work I did based on the time in my life and what was going on in my personal life. So when I was fresh out of school, newly married, I could travel, and I did. If they needed somebody to go somewhere, I said, I'll go. You know, send me. I can go to California. I can go to Carlsbad. I can go wherever you want me to go. When I started having kids and I was working at Barge Wagner, I took advantage of the fact that I really didn't have to go anywhere. I could do most of my work from the office, or I could do like a day trip. My kids are getting older now, so I'm not going to say they don't care if I'm gone overnight, but it's not a huge disruption to their life if I'm gone overnight. So I can travel somewhere now. So like for the correctional facilities, I was out in California before the holidays. I spent, I guess, last summer and the winter before that going out to a facility in Minnesota like once a month to check on progress for a remediation project up there. But overall, you're probably going to be doing a lot of paperwork. So I don't know how much your professors tell you that. But so some of the things that I wanted to make sure I highlight. It's very important if you are going to be a civil engineer or design professional that you need to get your PE license. That should be something on your developmental, professional development track. It should be a goal of yours. While you're still in school, you should be taking the FE exam. Is that something you guys offer, like here? Do they have to go somewhere else, or?
We require them to take it, and now they have to go to testing.
Oh, okay. So once you take the FE exam, you have to spend so much time actually working under a licensed professional, but then you can get your PE license, and that's very important if you're ever going to work in design and as a civil engineer for your professional development. One of the things I mentioned before is volunteer for stuff. I can think of a lot of instances where I have been able to advance my career because I was willing to do stuff that nobody else really wanted to do. So if you think about it, how many people are like, I cannot wait to work at a correctional facility? Anybody? Anybody in the room? Okay. I do that really often. I've been to probably 40 correctional facilities across the country. Is it glamorous? No. But I have clients that continue to give me work because they like the stuff that I do. And I got all of that because your boss came in one day and he's like, we'd like to land this client, and to do that, we need to do kind of this really crappy job. And I said, I will do that really crappy job because I think it'd be an opportunity. And I've been able to grow that into a lot of work with that client. So always make sure if somebody's offering something, I would take advantage of it. The other thing that I have serious issues with is never tell your boss no. I have some former employees that have told me no of stuff, and I've worked with people who have told boss no. And not like you can never refuse a work or if it's something dangerous or stuff like that, but if your boss comes to you and says, like even for me, if my boss came to me and said, Monica, I need you to file these papers, I wouldn't say, I'm a branch manager. I'm not going to file those papers. Go find somebody else. Because that's not being a team player. So I'll just encourage you right now. If your boss says something that you could, that's maybe below where you think you are, maybe you need to show your boss that you can do that and more. So I'd encourage you guys never to say no to requests. I have said no to getting men coffee though. So for all the ladies in the room, if they ask you to go get coffee, we can have a separate conversation about that. Another thing I'd like to encourage everybody to do is before you leave school, you should have some kind of a work experience. When you're looking for a job after graduation, if you send me your resume, the first thing I'm going to look at is not going to be your grades, it's not going to be what degree you've got. I mean, I'll kind of look at that, but it's going to be what kind of job experience you have, all right? So, like I said, I had 2 years of construction experience before I left school. So I was able to sit for I didn't, but I would have been able to sit for the PE exam way sooner than any of my colleagues. And people were more willing to hire me for stuff because I was less of a risk. When I was at the Savannah River site, I was talking with the director of engineering for the entire site, and he was talking about me and somebody else I hired on at the same time. And he said, yeah, because she was in the room, I guess that's what brought it up. He's like, yeah, we really took a risk when we hired Susan. And I was like, are you kidding me? Susan was a straight A student. She had straight A's through high school, through college, magna cum laude, everything. And she was a risk. And I asked him why. And he said, well, she didn't have any work experience. So we knew she could do the textbook work, but we didn't know what she'd be like in a working environment. Is she a team player? Can she take tasks and complete them on time in a work setting where you're not being graded all the time? So to him, and he said, director of engineering for a 25,000 person site said that this person with straight A's, no work experience was a risk. So that was really eye-opening for me. So I just encourage you guys to make sure that you get some kind of work experience, whether that's paid or unpaid. I've been incredibly impressed with the work that you guys do with the mission work that he spoke about when we first got up here. I know there was a design team that built a bridge, I think it was in Honduras. The work that went into that I thought was really impressive. So getting involved with that kind of stuff, I just really encourage you guys. Okay, so that's really all I had. Does anybody have any questions? Yeah.
We're talking about work experience. What about for some of us that maybe would you consider a job working for university here as something of work experience?
I feel like the work experience should be something in your major. There's a lot of opportunities to do, I guess what would be considered grunt work on construction sites or at offices. I know when I was at Barge Wagner, like a local employer here, they hired interns to do, I'm not going to say grunt work, but it's like fixing spreadsheets, and making tables out of them. Those are things that you guys know how to do. And it's stuff that maybe they don't want to pay their licensed professional, this salary to do. So it's not significantly hard work, but you get exposure to things. So there's opportunities like that at engineering firms. There's so many construction projects going on right now, and a lot of these companies will hire interns or co-ops. Like they'll hire people. I co-opt with J.A. Jones, which they're no longer in business. They've kind of got bought and sold and stuff back in the, early 2000s. But they had a program across the country where they recruited co-ops from engineering programs and sent them to work. So there's definitely opportunities, and I would encourage you, it's something in your major. And not just because, that's not just so that you'll be more marketable, it's also really for your benefit. When I was in college, in addition to the jobs I always had at least one job because I was paying my way through college. So I also worked for my professor. So I worked in a lab setting. I'm telling you, 3 weeks in a lab setting, and I knew I never wanted to work in a lab as my job, okay? And that's something I probably would have considered because it looks pretty neat, but being there, no way. And then working construction, I love construction. I love being out in the field. I love working with contractors. I love doing that work. But you have to be willing to move. That could be every 3 years, could be every 5 years, depending on the project, but you have to be willing to move. And after my time working construction, I realized I don't want to move every 2 or 3 years. That's just not something I want to do. And I wouldn't have learned that just going through college. So I kind of looked for other opportunities. So it's not just to get the work experience to make it marketable, but also kind of helps you figure out where you want to be. I didn't give you guys any prison stories. I'm sorry. If you want to hear prison stories, let me know. Any other questions? Yes. Prison story. I went to, you guys might have already heard this one, so I went to a prison, a correctional facility, and my client was very insistent that I go into a housing pod, which is where the inmates actually live. And I was like, I don't need to go in the housing pod. He said, yeah, you do. I was like, no, I really don't need to go in the housing pod. He's like, yep, you're going to have to go through the housing pod. So we walk into this housing pod, and all of a sudden, all eyes are on us because, like, I'm carrying like an iPad, so I'm very exciting. So everybody's staring at us as we're walking through the housing pod. Well, it's actually kind of reminds me of this room, actually. So they have cells on the outside wall and then open space in the middle. And in the cells, they have toilets, bathrooms. So I'm like, okay, I'm really intimidated. All these people are staring at me. And I don't want to just look down because that's kind of that makes you look more like a target if you're not looking people in the eye, right? Okay, so I'm like, all right, I'm going to look over here. I look over there, and there's a guy on the toilet. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to look over there. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to look over here. And there's like 300 men staring at me like, what is she doing? I was like, okay, I can't handle that. I'm going to look straight ahead. So I look straight ahead as we're walking through this pod, and there's a guy in the shower showering. And I'm like, okay, I will just look at my paper. So that was one of my first introductions to working at a correctional facility. And then they have trustees at correctional facilities. And I worked on one where I had to go through like mechanical spaces, like crawl under pipes and over pipes to set up my testing equipment. And the guy that they had assigned to me all day had a tear tattoo on his face. So if you guys know what that means, that's how I spent my day with. It was great. A lot of times I'll call my husband and tell him, okay, I'm going into the facility. If I'm not back out in 3 hours, then come and look for me. But seriously, I've never had any problems or anything. It's actually pretty interesting work, and the people that I work with are really great. Any other questions? All right, so just to leave you with, where's my other picture? Oh, well, that's a picture of my kids. I do have a life outside of engineering, and I want to help encourage you that you can have a life besides engineering. I wouldn't consider myself a runner, but I'm a runner. I do like 15Ks. I do sprint triathlons with my husband. We have 2 kids, so I get to spend time with my kids. I went skydiving. I had a picture of me skydiving, but it wasn't on there. You know, I got to drive a race car around Talladega, on the track at Talladega. You can have a really full life outside of your engineering work. It just helps you kind of get to that place. So for those that are thinking about work-life balance, it can be done. So, but if you guys have any questions, I have business cards in the back if you want to get in touch with me later. But I really appreciate you coming out and hope I didn't bore you too much.